If you're a longtime developer or if you've just gotten started building something, hopefully this video will give you some directions. And by the way, at the start of it, I give out a lot of my opinions. If you disagree with them, feel free to let me know in the comment section so that maybe we can even have a healthy debate over the topic. I made Claude summarize everything since I think it would be a bit boring to read through the entire article in the video, but starting off with human capital plus token capital. Every firm must build both the knowledge, judgment, and relationship of its people, plus the AI capability it owns. Human capital grows more valuable as token capital grows, because the human agency is what drives that growth. Now, this topic, along with this one, so against value concentration, let's skip to the second phrase, which is the first phase of globalization hollowed out entire industries through outsourcing. And the AI era shouldn't repeat that dynamic. Both of these points talk about how important humans are and that they aren't going to be replaced by AI. But what differs this article from those generic LinkedIn posts is that it's not necessarily telling us that AI isn't going to replace people. It's saying that people are important to the organization, mostly because of the domain knowledge that person has. So let's go over to ScholarlyDraw. Let me try to explain this in a way that I'm probably going to be raged at, and most likely, unfortunately, from software developers. But let's suppose in any given day, we have 5 employees working at a specific company. And I drew this UI to kind of look like an app that these developers are working on. But yeah, let's suppose this guy's working on authentication. This guy's working on a UI glitch. This guy is responsible for adding a new feature to whatever place in the website. This one is given an infrastructure task, and this one is fixing overall bugs. Now, this is an oversimplification of how a team of developers would work at a startup, or for example, the company I used to work for had 100 employees, but we only had 4 developers, and these developers used to work on a bunch of different apps. These were kind of the tasks we received throughout the day. But again, despite the oversimplification, we can use this as an example to understand that today, what is happening is something like this. This guy, instead of just working on the auth, and not just working on the auth, but with AI, it's almost delusional to say that it doesn't optimize our workflow. It does, and that's an absolute fact. Now, instead of having this task, he can have the task of not only implementing auth, but overall testings. Let's see it as this side is where we're headed, this is where we were, and still are in many companies. So now with the second developer, we can give it still the UI glitch fix, as well as adding a new feature. Now let's actually skip to the 5th developer, the one that was fixing bugs. He's that type of guy that doesn't understand that market doesn't have feelings. And I do understand him. I do understand the logic that, well, you have 8 hours a day to work on whatever. So in this case, he had to work on bug fixes. Okay. The problem is that he's just seeing this, bug fixes. The only thing he understands is that he needs to fix these bugs. And if he can do this in 2 hours, then his mindset is, well, didn't I accomplish the desired goal? Isn't what I'm hired to do done? And this comes along with the thought of, isn't technology freeing me more time to do what I like? Then if so, why do I, aside from having the bug fixes that I had previously, I have to do more things? And that is because you are being, and probably being, paid for your time. You're not being paid to do a specific feature. You're being paid to be as efficient as possible in this 8-hour window. And honestly, you're welcome to disagree with that. I would like a world that didn't necessarily have to be like this, where we get to the point of some people having burnout because of this. But the problem is there's a natural selection in the market where if this guy continues working and doing the same thing, eventually the company will find a guy that not only works on bug fixes, but does that with agents. And the rest of his time, he's improving that agent, making him and his time just overall more efficient than this guy. Not because AI is something completely magical that is replacing jobs, but this guy using AI is just much more efficient than this one. So naturally, the market replaces this guy. And there is an argument to this guy building a replacement for himself, because if he eventually succeeds in making this agent automate his entire workflow, then he just built something that is going to replace his job. But that's exactly the point that Satya Nadella addresses, because It's easy for a company to see this workflow, see this automation, and think they might not need that person anymore. But if you have someone that understands the company's domain, understands the company's mission, and on top of that can use AI tools to do his job better, that's exactly this point. Every firm must build both the knowledge, judgment, and relationship of its people, plus the AI capability it owns. So, and this is my opinion, but a person that refuses to use a tool that makes them more efficient out of stubbornness just naturally will get laid off. And that has been a reality forever, even before AI came along. But now the problem is this outsourcing right here. Some companies might just not understand how valuable these specific employees are. Now, you might have noticed we covered authentication, UI glitch, along with adding a new feature, and we hired one more person to solve the bug fixes along with an agent. But we still have one more task and two other developers. And honestly, we can even give this task to the second developer, making it so that these two developers seem to not have anything to do. But then we have to remember that most, if not every new technology comes with new jobs. So for example, I have my own app called Preposter. It helps you track outliers from YouTube. And before, the way users could interact with the UI or the overall data is by actually having this table, filtering out exactly what they need in the time range that they need that data. But now we can add furthermore tools that just makes that analysis just easier. So I don't know if this is an entire new job, but it's certainly a software developer that understands more about prompting to create an entire AI analysis page that efficiently uses AI tooling along with an iSystem prompt, maybe widgets usage, resulting in an entirely new feature inside of the app. And by the way, they'll also have to worry about token usage and overall issues that are particular to AI development. Now, this is just an example of what the third developer could do. The fourth one could take on the MCP usage, skills, overall integrations with other tools, a chatbot with a bunch of different toolings that might be the same tools for the AI analysis, but it's part of new work. Maybe I'd have to also add a voice feature in here. So AI added a whole new set of concerns that we should think about, which leaves us at the end of the day with the original number of 5 developers. And it may not seem like the market is going towards this direction right now, since at least as of for now, some companies might not recognize that these guys are really important. So in my opinion, eventually the market for software developers will just grow. Just the way that we work and the tools that we use will be different, especially because of so many entrepreneurs building their apps with a very weak basis of vibe coding instead of understanding concepts and doing the natural agentic coding. Now, back to the article, I know there's 6 different points, but honestly, they kind of boil down to the same thing, like these two that I just covered. And now the second, third, fourth, and sixth points, from what I understood, it talks about the horizontal and vertical growth of any given company. Actually, the second point also points towards the human understanding, the knowledge, the domain that is gathered. But then, when moving on to the third point, the architecture should let you swap out a generalist model without losing the company veteran expertise built into your system. So, from my understanding, one point of what he's talking about is not letting your app being slave to one specific model, and not only model, but the entire tooling ecosystem, and rather be able to integrate into any model. One way I like to do this is by using OpenRouter. With OpenRouter, all I have to do when I want to swap a model with another one is change that model's name inside of my environment variable. So for example, if I want to use DeepSeek V4, all I have to do is grab that, go in here and change this. Now, there are some configurations that some models expect, so some of them won't allow us to set a max amount of tokens, for example, but it's a really easy change, not really something to be worried about. But doing this honestly became mainstream, I guess, especially because all of these providers implemented everything based on what OpenAI created. So all of these endpoints are really easy to change even if you're not using OpenRouter. So then the other parts that Satya addresses is exactly the loop. So this loop becomes the firm's new IP. It's compounding, hill climbing machine, and companies that build it early gain an advantage that's hard to replicate regardless of new model capabilities. Build a frontier ecosystem, not just a frontier model. Value should flow broadly across every company, industry, and country, with each organization owning the learning loop that encodes its knowledge. That's the stable equilibrium to build toward. Now, from my understanding, if we're also building with these LLMs, let's imagine the LLM as a separate machine here. That based on user feedback, for example, we can then feed that over to an LLM, have that system, and this is all done, by the way, by that efficient employee. Okay. So this is the guy with the company domain and the understanding of how to build an agent that efficiently does this. So now what happens is the app is also growing vertically. I mean, at least this is the analogy I thought to bring to the video, but there's also development specs. And this one is easier for us to see because, I mean, it's part of our development process. It doesn't really depend on a user to test the app. So, for example, again with Preposter, I really haven't launched this app yet. So there's no user giving me feedback, but I can still grow it vertically exactly by improving the development specs. I believe I talked about this in a previous video, and I know that influencers usually say you need skills, download this skill and that skill, but no, I believe skills are more about how they are efficient to exactly what your specific app needs. So, for example, if you're using a skill that is way too specific into how your app should be designed, it's kind of doing the opposite to what a skill should be doing, which is to provide context to the LM on building your specific app. It's just telling the AI how to build a generic app. And honestly, if you're going for a generic app, then just don't use the skill. You'll even spend much less tokens. Just to give you an example, I have a set of projects inside of the app where when I get inside of one specific project, I can link a YouTube video. And when I link that video, the transcription from the video is inside of the context for this AI session. So the way that it works is much different than if I attach the MCP inside of Claude. But what happens if I change the way that one particular MCP tool works? For example, I just generated some title suggestions for this specific video. What if I wanted to hard code a way for these title suggestions to be 10 instead of just 5 suggestions? Now, this was once a problem because every time I'd have to specify that it should change the prompting for title suggestions in this interface as well as inside of the MCP. And then because my AI agent interface was different before, I had to also tell it to come in here and change the way titles were suggested in here as well. But because every time I'm implementing something, I'm not just worried about the implementation, but also how the entire workflow will work the next time I open up a session and ask for the same thing. Through this recursively optimized skill, it'll know every time that I ask to change the way that titles work, to also consider changing it inside of the MCP, as well as even understand that it's inside of a specific UI, and also just remind me to change that specific part of the app. So now if we're building things with just words, having a nice documentation of context that your LLM should know of before implementing any new feature or updating or even to delete something that it should have further context of actually becomes a huge moat for whatever you're building. All right, that is it for this video. Let me know your opinions down in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then.